guess if it is really just the two of us, we can very quickly decide whether there is something to talk about besides how it's going.
Yeah,
Like I guess like last no, that wasn't last week, but the last time it happened.
yeah,
I
we'd have
guess
put
you went
cancelled as it
over
was only
the major open RFCs, and I think from what I've seen, there is no change to either of them.
right.
Only
And
thing
I'm
I
gonna,
could I could maybe add something to the project status thing because that's triggered by me. I wasn't there in this incident. But yeah, my goal would be to make this transparent for both users as well as maintainers across the project. Because I realized with like my Ubuntu LTS RFCs that there's not really much reactions coming in from people I would have expected to react
mm,
on such proposals, which is kind
I can
of my,
chat with you
my
on
goal to
multi-arch.
make. Hmm?
I can chat on multi-arch for a bit as well with you, because I know you care
Multi-arch
about
is
this stuff a lot, right? Um,
multi-arch is also still out there, yeah.
yeah, and I hit a snag with that, which I was reporting in last week's meeting as part of the upstream and stuff. So
Okay.
if you're doing multi-arch, I should probably run back over that with you just so that you're aware of it as well. Um,
Maybe.
there is a platform spec issue with platforms 0.10, 0.11 when performing daemon builds where the run image is multi-arch.
Hmm.
Um, because of the way that it's the restorer phase that rewrites the link to the platform specific run image. Um, but the platform doesn't know what it's going to be rewritten to. Because on the platform we can do a pull of the run image specifying a platform. Yeah. So imagine this: I'm building on. It doesn't really matter. I'm building on any platform, but I specify that I'm going to pull the run image that corresponds to my builder image platform, so I know I'll get a matching pair that will work as I move forwards in my platform.
Hmm.
Um, if you do that via Docker or Podman, then it stores the platform specific image locally under the SHA manifest of the combined manifest, not of the platform specific.
Hmm.
Yep, which means that then the restorer phase rewrites the reference to the run image to be the SHA reference to the platform specific image,
Yeah.
and then exporter discovers that that image isn't already in the daemon, and it all goes horribly wrong. Because if you've pulled an image using Docker's pull image API via the daemon, and you've specified a platform, the key thing is that it will not store that image in the daemon under the platform specific SHA. It will store it under the combined manifest SHA, which to me seems a little bit twisted. But there's this disconnect. Now, if you're running a multi-phase build, where the lifecycle steps are each in their own container, then it's possible
Hmm.
for the platform to intercede between the restorer and the extender, sorry, the restorer and the exporter steps, reread the analyzed TOML, pull the new updated reference and go, oh, hey, I'm supposed to be using this image from my run image, and then do another image pull, which in theory doesn't take much time because you've already got all the layers that comprise the platform specific image locally anyway. It's just not tagged correctly in your local daemon yet. So that last image pull, because if you do actually pull the image via its platform specific SHA, then it is stored in the daemon under its platform specific SHA. It's just when you pull the image using a platform qualifier to get it via the API,
Hmm.
it isn't.
Okay. So
This, as I say,
yeah.
this if you happen to be building using Creator with a trusted builder where it runs all the steps inside one container, there's no point. There's no way that can ever function. So platforms 0.10 and 0.11, if you try to do a build where there is a multi-platform run image and you're using a daemon build, you know what I mean, where it's mounting the daemon socket into the lifecycle containers.
Oh, but it's only happening on Docker daemons, so it would work on
Yes.
any kind of CI/CD thing that directly
If
has
you were
the
using
lifecycle talk to the registry and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
if you're doing a registry build where you don't mount the Docker socket into the container, this is bypassed completely and you see a different path and it all works well. Exactly. But
Okay.
it's for local development when you're doing a daemon build. And of course, the platform level that gets selected is a combination of the platform levels that are supported by your local platform implementation and the platform levels that are claimed to be supported by your builder image. So you're not in direct control over which platform level could be selected.
Wow.
I discovered all this because I've written a platform implementation, and I've
Mm.
spent a little while teaching GitHub how to run matrix tests against it.
Hmm.
Which
Why did
I'm
you write a platform? But anyway, that's a different topic.
a long story short, because Spring said we couldn't use theirs.
What? Who said?
So Spring,
Spring.
yeah, you know Spring Boot.
Yeah,
You know they've
that's
got
Spring.
A Spring Boot plugin that does build pack
Yeah.
builds. Yeah,
Yeah, but it does use Pack, right?
no, it does not. No, it's a full Java implementation of the platform spec.
You're kidding me.
Nope, it's
I'm pretty sure like last time I looked, it was calling
no,
out to
it
Pack,
never
didn't
has.
it?
No, it never has. I mean, I
Wow.
know this guy who wrote most of the code for it, Scott Roberts. He's
Oh,
a very bright
hey.
guy. They've got it because it all has to run from Maven, and you can't execute out from Maven because you don't know what platform you're on. You have to have a platform-specific binary for Mac and Linux and everything else to run Pack. You can't.
All right. I didn't know
So
that.
they wrote their own one. Back when we were looking at adding build pack builds to Quarkus in Red Hat, I was like, well, hey, you guys have already written one. Do you want to like break out your platform implementation to a separate project and we'll collaborate on it and work on it? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, would you mind if I forked it and just took it my direction? And they said, oh, we'd rather you didn't. And I went, well, it's Apache licensed. We can do what we want with it. And he went, yeah, but that was, yeah. And so I decided that rather than just piss off the entire Spring community, I'd write my own from scratch. So I did.
Is that really wow. Okay, I'm
That
out
was
of
the discussion I had with them. Yeah, like they can obviously none of this is an official written down policy from Spring, and they couldn't stop me, and they're aware of that. But it's just I know the guy who wrote that stuff, and so I just respect his opinions. If he doesn't want me to use his code like that, then I won't. It's not exactly difficult to write your own. It's just a lot more fun.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know we have written our own platform, right?
So
For
we've
for a
now got the
Jenkins integration where there's not necessarily a Docker daemon present, so you can't use Pack.
yeah.
So we've written a platform as well. So I'm not questioning that per se. I was
So
just
what's yours
curious.
written in?
Hmm?
What did you write yours in?
Go.
Go. Okay, yeah, yeah. So you're pretty much close to the standard, the spec and stuff. So as you can find it at, let me see if I can throw it in the chat for this thing here. It'll be quicker. Doink.
So
There.
it's like
So
we've even written in a sense a second one that runs within Cloud Foundry.
right.
So we've
So that's my
integrated
the
cloud
link
native
I've just put there
buildpacks.
in GitHub. That's the one that I've written. It's all in Java.
Okay.
So it's got a full Fluent Builder DSL on the front of it, where you can just build up the type of build that you want it to run, and it will go off and do it. There's a big update coming to it fairly soon that I've got in my private fork off of that repo that is
Yeah.
pending changes going in. That'll add per repository authentication and a few other bits and pieces, which are just messed up at the moment. Nice to do, but
Okay.
yeah.
And that one is
It,
using a Docker daemon as well, or what? From Java.
no, this will that my Java one will use either Docker or registry, depending on how you tell it to build. It can build with any platform from 0.7 to 0.12. I didn't get around to 0.13. There aren't enough significant changes anyway there.
How would it do isolation if you don't use Docker daemons? Just no
But
isolation. Now, well, you at
it,
least like I mean, the life cycle is operating on root, like slash workspace and stuff like that, right? So how do you do
so
that?
not many of my phases run as root. Only the
Okay.
ones that are absolutely required to run as root run as root. Everything else runs as a non-root user.
No, no, I wasn't talking about the root user. I was talking about
Okay.
like the file system layout that the platform uses is
Yeah.
rooted in root, like in slash. How did you do that without running things in containers
Although
with
running
the
in
repository?
containers.
Oh,
So
you're wrong.
I'm using Docker Java to talk
Yeah,
to the socket
that's what I
API
meant.
to
Like you,
yeah.
okay, okay.
But
That's
the
the
difference is
misunderstanding.
I'm capable of running either a daemon based build where I mount the socket into the container so the lifecycle can use it,
Mm.
or I can do a registry based build where I don't mount the socket into the container. The lifecycle still does the build in a container. It's
Yeah,
just it
yeah,
has
okay. Got
no
it.
capability to talk to my daemon anymore.
Yeah, yeah, I got it.
Um,
Got it.
yeah, there's all sorts of other neat tricks that you had to put in there. Like I stream all the content into the container from one pipe across to another one whilst it's all flying, so I don't end up creating temp files on disk with tar bundles and
Mm,
A lot of stuff to do with permissions. It runs against, I've tested and run against Podman in rootless and rootful mode, and in Docker, and on Windows and on Mac OS, with Docker and Podman in each configuration where
mm.
possible. There are a lot of little gotchas hiding in some of those.
That's
Um,
yeah, interesting thing. But yeah, as I said, we've written two platforms as well. I still have one on my list that at some point in time I need to find time for it. I want to build one with BuildKit LLB.
mhm. I had
But
to do this
anyway,
one with Java, so I could plug it
Hmm?
into the Quarkus Maven build plugin. Um, And that's probably all it's ever going to see, to be fair. I mean, that's probably the only usage. But I thought rather than do it the way that Spring did and embed it into the plugin's code itself, I'd make it as a library and consume it into Quarkus, because that way, if anybody else wants to come along, they can consume my library. And I've had
Mhm.
a few people come along and you start using it, which has been quite fun. Yeah,
Oh, really? People are
yeah.
interested in running their own
No,
platforms.
absolutely, because it's people who are running Java-based stuff, who either Java-based tooling or Java-based build
Mhm.
systems, yeah, with Ant or whatever else, are like, well, I want to be able to kick off a build pack build, and it needs to be multi-platform, and it needs to be flexible, it needs to work. Well,
And
you've got a
yeah,
library like this, you can slot it straight into a wrapper piece of code and tie it into whatever you've got. So if you look
true.
at something like, in theory, we could use this to drive build pack builds from Eclipse or something like that. Not that most
Yeah,
people will be
true,
running that
true,
anymore, but
true.
I'm sure there's other, IDEs that you could plug it into in a similar manner now.
Oh, and I'm
Uh,
sure there's still people running Eclipse.
yeah, yeah,
For
yeah. Even if it's under
sure,
different names.
for
Haven't
sure they will. Yeah,
done it for a while.
interesting things. Really interesting.
Yeah.
It's like also the level of bugs. Like, is upstream aware of the problem and looking into a fix? You sounded initially as
Right.
it's actually a spec issue.
I've raised the two issues. It's not so much a spec issue. Well, it is a spec issue in the sense that I say that it's only a problem for 0.10 and 0.11 because at 0.12 they introduce the minus daemon flag to the exporter and the restorer. That means that they change behavior, and instead of changing the reference to the platform specific SHA reference of the run image, they change the reference to the ID of that image in your current daemon.
Okay.
So it
Oh,
starts
so,
using a
so
Docker.
with Oda 12 is fine again, or what?
After 12, it's all is
Oh,
good again.
after 12. Okay,
Yeah,
whatever.
12 and onwards, or before 10, and you're fine.
I mean, if you think about that, like, I mean, it's mainly about assembling a file system and defining a process. The
Well, it's all
specification
down to
has
the problem
quite
is that
some.
the problem is there were assumptions made when extensions were introduced in the spec at 0.10 onwards. So 0.10 and 0.11, you've got extensions present which can do things like switch the run image. So the life cycle binaries are trying to keep
Ah,
all of their houses in order by keeping a tally of what's happening in analyze.toml, and that updates the run image reference so that it's pointing at the right thing. And that works at 0.10 and 0.10 if there's no multi-arch, because of course the reference you get is always the reference you'd have. But multi-arch was happening in parallel to that effort, and so it took a while to hit a point where we tried a multi-arch build that had extensions, and then you end up falling down this little crack where, so it's selected this run image, and now I'm trying to select a different one, but now the restorer's rewritten it to a tag that nobody has any clue of, and nobody can get in anymore to pull that before the exporter does its job and fails. So yeah, there is an issue there. I've chatted with Natalie on it. I've worked with Natalie a lot on lifecycle stuff for CNCF spec issues.
yeah, yeah.
We worked with her to get the extension spec created, and she's aware of it, but she's out on parental leave at the moment.
Yeah, she's on
That's
maternal leave, right?
Yeah, that's the one. So she's out for a while. So
Yeah.
I said that given it's daemon builds only, given that it only hits these two particular platforms, and that by default Pack will select the highest platform it can find, and Paketo marks everything as good till the highest platform it can find out at the moment, it's unlikely to hit people at the moment.
Yeah.
You would have to have a builder that popped its versions out at 0.10 or 0.11, and you would have to be running that locally with a multi-arch run image for that builder. It's quite the set
It's
of
hard to get into
circumstances.
that. Yeah, that's
It's
true.
possible. It's definitely possible, and it's not detectable easily. And yeah, the best we can say at the moment is we recognize the error that will come out if somebody does it, and we'll be able to tell them, please update your builder to 0.12 and your problems will go away. But it's not a
It
fun thing
sounds
to
a
have to
lot
tell
like
people.
that. Yeah, it sounds a
Yeah.
lot like that.
I mean, the fix isn't easy either, because the fix in theory might mean a retrospective change to 0.10 and 0.11 platform spec, which I'm not really comfortable with, because of course once you've published a spec, you shouldn't make a breaking change to it except to a newer version. So
Yeah.
the alternative could be to just move on from those specs, deprecate them as fast as possible and say they don't exist. Or we could bury it and hide it between the phases by having an even earlier phase do the rewrite of analyze toml and put the extra information in there to enable the new code that we'd have to put in, because we can put it inside the lifecycle implementation, right?
Yeah.
But then you have to change the way the lifecycle implementation flows between itself, which isn't, oddly enough, part of the platform spec. Then you
It,
get away with it.
it's like
So
I would probably also go for, let's see if we can recognize the problem case so that we can inform people. Let's get rid
yeah,
of these versions. Let not try to fix it in there or make it even more complicated. Like nowadays,
that's my
I'd go as far as extensions should have never landed in the
Oh,
spec.
I need them. We
Oh, yeah,
rely on
that
those for
that
UBI.
maybe something similar, maybe something whatever, but like if I recall the how this worked from beginning to the end, it's a very old endeavor to, oh, we need some capabilities for build packs to do what build packs usually can't do. And the moment they started to revive the Docker file RFC, which I think sounds a bit strange for a build pack project, but that's different. When they revived that, I think there weren't really many people present that knew why the endeavor was started in the first place. What was the goal?
So I
And
can give
it's
some
like,
history to this. I can
and
give
I
some
can
because
see,
I mean,
like, I can see the goal that you had, which is probably just dynamically switching run images, right? Not really
no, no,
using.
no, no. We need to be able
Oh,
to have
oh, you do more?
a empty. We want a builder image with nothing in it, and Red Hat distributes its runtimes as RPMs.
Oh, a
That's the
building
only
image
way
with
that you can perform a
nothing in.
supported install of a runtime is install an RPM. So our builder image needs to be able to do essentially RPM install Java dash whatever version number, you know what I mean? Or RPM install node. Um, but
Oh,
obviously there isn't a way to do that in Buildpacks unless you have
okay.
something that extends the builder image. We can't download the RPM from a repository and then manually extract it, because Buildpacks aren't allowed to write to the root of the image. They're only allowed to write underneath slash
Mm.
workspace or slash layers or whatever, you know. Now, the problem with that is that a lot of the Red Hat binaries, they're not intended to be installed in any location other than where the RPM would put them. They have hard-coded references in them to the dependent paths, because that's part of the testing that Red Hat does with that runtime, is knowing that it will be installed here so we can test it and guarantee it's working from there. We would not support it if it was installed somewhere else, even if you managed to get it working somehow. So that's
Yeah,
really important to
got it.
us to have it in the right place. And the only way to put it in the right place is to use the tooling that we provide to put it there, right? Because that guarantees that from a software support point of view, we're able to look after a customer if something goes wrong.
Yeah,
So
gotcha.
the
I was,
original,
yeah, I probably lost track of what you were doing in a time
yeah.
where you still provided multiple run images that were
So we've got multiple run
fully
images
filled, so to say.
because the original implementation of the Dockerfile stuff was going to be in multiple phases,
Right?
and modifying the run images was going to be the very final phase. We couldn't wait that long, so we managed to add an intermediate phase before the end that
Yeah.
said we're allowed to switch the run image, but we're not allowed to modify it. And that was
Yeah,
fine
okay.
with us because Red Hat publishes a whole bunch load of UBI runtime images for all the different versions of all the different runtimes that we support in the field
Oh,
anyway.
but yeah, but still you need Java C for building Java apps, and that's where
You
the
need the
builder
and
needs to be
node and whatever
filled with
else, and
the
it's got to be
right
the right
version.
version.
Okay, get
Yeah,
it.
exactly. So the builder, we use UBI minimal as
Mm.
a base image, and then we just add whatever we need to it. And then our extensions switch the run image to the appropriate image that extends the Red Hat images. Yeah, because the
Mm.
Paketo run images extend the Red Hat ones, and then everything's fine, and off we go. And all the licenses are met and happy, which is also important, right? Um, we could have gone the way of using UBI minimal for the run image and then extending the run image. We
Mm.
chose not to do that even after run image extension was introduced, because that has risks with rebasing.
Yeah, yeah, it
because
doesn't work with rebasing. It's like it's pretty clear.
it
If
can work.
extensions use the power you give extensions, then they are not rebasable, right?
No, they can be, but you have to know what you've done, and you
Okay.
have to know what happens when it's rebased. Like it's quite plausible you could put something into the startup of the container that figures out if it's been rebased onto a new one and have it go and get the thing at the next start. But let's not go there. I mean, it's a lot cleaner in my mind if you keep it so that you've got a run image that's already got the runtime in it. We'll switch to that. Great. Means that as well we're able to leverage all the testing that's already been done against the
Yep,
UBI
yep, yep.
runtime images, which is vast. So that I'm very happy with.
It's yeah, there are quite some complications in the overall picture, I guess. It's
Well, the
funny.
original the original story for this was stack packs. It wasn't Dockerfile
Mhm.
RFC. And
Yeah.
stack packs I liked a little bit better.
Hmm.
Stack packs were the ones where there would be build packs and stack packs that could themselves go together into a builder image, and stack packs were allowed to modify the stacks. But stack packs were cute in that they would package themselves into the runtime image so that if the runtime image was rebased, the stack pack would replay itself against the updated stack. Yeah.
Hmm.
So all the information it needed to repair the run image and do it again could be done during the rebase operation because it would apply the rebase and then bring it up and tell it to reapply the stack pack to it and then take that image and publish that one. I thought that made sense, but
It's
yeah,
like
that was at a point. Yeah, so that was at a point in my life. That was late 2020 to give you a
mm,
time frame. That was a point when my partner was in chemotherapy, radiotherapy. Things were not going very well for her at all, and
mm,
it got round to early 2021 and the discussion started to shift towards, I think it was Stephen Levine
mm.
started talking about introducing a Dockerfile RFC because it was just stack packs were looking hideously complicated to implement. And Docker files would be easier because we could use something like Canico to automatically update the running builder image on the fly. It's amusing because Canico has just been discontinued by Google, and we now need up in upstream to figure out if we're going to stay using a discontinued library or if we want to rewrite the whole of the extensions capability to sit on top of Builder, which is from Red Hat, which we've done because we did two prototypes. We prototyped out for both Builder and for Canico. The reason we work with Canico is the permissions you need to set up to make Canico work are trivial. The permissions to
Mm,
make Builder work insists on you setting everything up. Whereas
mm.
Canico just is do it, and if you hit a permissions problem, you will fail. Builder, it's like I need to know that you're going to do it right before you do it, or I'm not going to let you. And I
It's like
get
yeah,
that the two frame of minds. Builder's definitely got a stronger security model. Therefore, we're going to have to do some work to allow that to happen if we move over. But anyway, so by the time we hit early 2021, my partner was in palliative care and didn't make it, sadly. So I then took rather a long time out to handle, bereavement and grief and everything else. And I was basically poking people at Red Hat to tell them, look, it's going this direction. I can't deal with this. You need to run with this, and we've ended up with what we've got, right? So that's where the extensions spec came from. It was that initial request of how do I install an RPM during build, which was originally going to be stack packs, which became the Dockerfile RFC, which now became what we've got today. And I'm fine with what's there. It works more than adequately for what you need when you use it. But I think there are still challenges ahead, certainly to do with Canico's
mm.
discontinuation.
It's not only that, I think in the platform we've written, we will not be able to really support extensions. Doesn't work from the setup. Is
You
also
should be able to.
there's a
What
couple.
blocks it? What blocks it? Curious.
Well, it's like we have a CI/CD library that's maintained by SAP, and they internally run on a Kubernetes cluster, so you're pretty restricted, and like there's basically no chance to start multiple pods or do something like that. So you can't actually do the phases
So you
in
can only run
phases
Creator.
and stuff like that. So there are a couple of limitations that way, and all in all, I'm not even sure what like if they really are worth the complexity you might introduce also in terms of what goes wrong. I mean, there are multiple of these things. I, for one, I don't think that that rebase is particularly useful. Um, I
I can
see how
see
that
that.
was useful in the CF context where the build packs are doing that and stuff like that. But if you
I
have a
think
look
it made.
at like we have our own stacks and builders,
Yeah,
also based on Ubuntu, and we have a Java run image that has like 5 packages.
yeah,
Like, what are the situations where there is a vulnerability that needs a critical fix, and this vulnerability happens to reside in the base image, and not in like the dependency tree of your Java application, right? And then you can't rebase that one either, right? So we have
yeah,
reduced the base file system to a degree that I don't see where rebase is useful.
yeah. No,
Right?
I'm
So
with
we
you on that.
tricked
I
we
think,
tricked the system in a sense, right? I see how with 120 open operating system packages, rebase is
yeah.
crucial.
And I
On the
think that makes
other
more
hand
sense for
side,
other languages, right? Like when you look at Ruby or Node, where they have a dependency upon system packages like ImageMagick and stuff like that,
but
you could understand they've probably got a bit of a larger exposure across their base image compared
like
with their application
you,
surface.
we have a node run image with like below 20 packages and didn't get
Right.
a complaint about a missing package yet.
Yeah.
Maybe
It
there
depends
are
what you're trying to do and how you're trying to talk out.
sleeping somewhere, but apparently, in our context at least, there's nothing much more needed.
Yeah.
I do see the point of that, and but then again, I don't like the extension spec very much, right? Because of, for example, the separation, right? So if you really want to bring something there, like switching the run image or even installing stuff, then you end up having build packs and extensions for the same domain, like for the same topic. There is a build pack that can trigger that your extension then installs Java on your run image.
Well,
Things
you've
like that,
seen what
I
we
think.
have you seen what we
But
did for Paketo, for the UBI stuff in Paketo? Have you seen what we did there?
we haven't really looked closely there now.
Okay, so in the Paketo UBI stuff, we've got a Java extension, or it's a UBI Java extension, just because it's only going to run on the UBI image.
Hmm.
But the UBI Java extension, the provides and requires stuff that
Yeah.
Buildpacks use. Yeah. Now
Hmm.
extensions aren't allowed to require;
Hmm.
they're only allowed to provide because they get to
Hmm.
run before everything else. So if they required stuff, you get in chicken and egg situations, and bad things would happen. So what we do is with the Java extension, we provide a Java runtime in the same way that Equinox provides a Java runtime. Or is it not Equinox? Is it Equinox? What's the Bell one called?
The
Bell's
Bellsoft
Bell.
Liberica.
Yeah, Bellsoft Liberica. That provides claims to provide both a Java runtime, a JDK, a JRE, and
Hmm.
native source capability, whatever. So we claim to provide that from our extension as well.
Hmm.
Now, in the case where you're doing a build where they're in the mix and we're in the mix, well, extensions run first. So our
Hmm.
provide wins. And when it gets around to the point where it's going to run the Bellsoft Liberica one, um, when it checks the build plan to see, am I still in scope? It says, oh, I'm not needed anymore. It just backs off. Or that we've done it that way because that enables us to use the same Java meta build pack that everything else is using in Paketo. But if we wanted to shrink our build image by a couple of 100K, we could knock off Bellsoft Liberica completely because it's not needed anymore. That's all we did. Literally we did. We just dropped in an extension that meets that provides part of the spec,
Yeah.
and everything else takes care of. So we
But
haven't duplicated the domain because the Maven builds, the packaging, the all the
yeah,
rest of the stuff that happens in Paketo for Java apps is still happening. It's still exactly what it was. The only part we've altered is where the runtime comes from.
but it's like, yeah, I think things that I had in mind in terms of what could extensions be useful for would
Yeah,
be something rather in the realm of some build pack or some whatever thing, extension or whatever, in the, let's say in the node realm, could actually accumulate knowledge about, let's see, at least the I don't know what, the 500 most popular NPM packages and their native library dependencies.
yep,
So you could have some mechanism that really on demand installs OS packages, but that would need
yeah,
a build pack that kind of figures out what to do, and then it would need the build pack to communicate these demands to somebody who
yep.
runs first, right? And things
Which
like
is
that.
easy,
So
which is
that
absolutely
would be
trivial
where
because
I
you have the
see that this would be useful, right? If I could really
so you
make it.
have the build packs detect phase. The
Hmm.
Buildpacks detect phase has a look at the application and says this
Hmm.
application is going to need the 7 following system libraries. So it issues requires for system library dash system library name with the version tagged against it
Hmm.
as metadata. And then you have an extension that fires up and claims to provide those that's packaged as well. And if you're really smart, you do the extension so that it claims to provide all the things that it happens to know about, and then it will just mesh the two together and everything works. It can work. I mean, there was a lot of thought put into making sure that the system package install scenario is viable beyond apt-get curl, which is all it was tested with. But that was kind of where we were headed from.
Hmm.
Because I think it was Ruby that was the main language wise that we're interested, because a lot of their stuff sits straight on system libraries, and the default run images do not have the correct system libraries for them. Um, but
Yeah.
yes, no, it's a sensible spec. It's not difficult to implement from a CI/CD pipeline point of view. We have done it with Tecton and managed to update that to support the extensions. You
Hmm.
do have to use conditional steps because you need to be able to figure out in some logic on a step whether or not this build is going to use extensions or not. Then you have to do things like obviously execute the generator phase rather, or the extender phase, I forget what it is, instead of the build phase. The build phase swaps out and another one swaps in. That's the key difference between the two paths.
Yeah, but don't you also you somehow have to dynamically start some of the containers in the later phases because they need to actually be based on the chosen run images and stuff like
No,
that.
no,
The whole
Lifecycle takes care of all of that. Lifecycle does that for you. You don't need to dynamically do anything. You do pretty much exactly the same build that you do today, except instead of invoking the build lifecycle phase, you invoke I think it's extender.
No, but what I heard from colleagues when it came to could we implement it and how would it be implemented, we actually ran into issues with how Kaneko compares the before and after versions and whether it then decides to do something. And there it would be crucial actually that the whole thing, the life cycle, I don't know the phase that it was exactly, but that this phase runs in the context of the run image because otherwise you might happen to have Kaneko think that certain packages are already there because you have them on your build image and then not installing them into the run image. I didn't try to actually
Yeah.
fully
So
understand,
that's
comprehend this, but this was
So
one of
that
the
scenario only
problems colleagues
happens
raised.
after. I mean, that scenario is only plausible from I think platform 12 or 13 after run image extension was added. But yes, when run image extension is added, you have another phase to run in multi-phase, and that phase is to extend the run image. And you
Mhm.
run the extender flag with an argument of the run image, and it performs the extension of it for you. And
But
that
it doesn't
happens
have to
before the
run in
extension.
that run image context and stuff like that. But to
No,
make matters,
that's okay, but that's you're running a container based off of an image, and it's done there. You just run the lifecycle image and pass it, and it takes care of it. You don't need
but
it does
yeah,
it
but you
works.
need to be able to start up a container with a run image as the file system. So that's what I meant with dynamically.
Um,
You need to dynamically start, like give that container something. But like
I would need to
all
check
in
that. I'm
all,
not I'm not 100% on that, but I'm not sure if that's the case for the run image extender. I'd need to go back and double check and see what I put in for there. I haven't done any tests with run image extension yet because I don't
yeah,
have, we never use it in Paketo for our
yes, yeah.
stuff.
But
But I would say that either way, that's not a platform concern. The
mhm.
life cycle takes care of that. The only thing you have to be able to do from a platform concern is start the appropriate container with the appropriate arguments. Yeah. And the life cycle is the bit that's running Canico. The life cycle that's bit that's applying it, because I suspect within a couple of years, if we're still doing this, the life cycle won't be running Canico anymore. It'll probably be running Builder. But you won't need to care about that from a platform point of view, because if you just drive the right phases in the right order with the right arguments, it will perform an extension build.
As I said, it wasn't crucial enough to dig any further, but it sounded like
Yeah.
we would at least run into severe issues. And to
Good.
shorten, maybe I'm wrong in that, but to make matters short, I think for like for basically providing a file system, the spec is pretty complicated. I think. Maybe I'm
Uh,
wrong with that, but like gut feeling, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm really underestimating the problem. and it
I'm
needs a
coming
complex
to,
solution, but it sounds like it's pretty complex. Also, like the
yeah,
whole thing, like how the plans work, right? And how build packs communicate with each other is like,
that
I mean,
that
you need
part
a
is very
PhD to
badly
understand
documented.
that, right?
That's very badly documented, and it's not a standard. It's part. I would argue, and I've settled it in my head as the content of the plan and how the plan is used is a responsibility of the build pack ecosystem that you're
Uh-huh.
working within. For instance, the fact that um, JRE and JDK have meaning when the provides requires within Paketo means nothing within
Mhm.
another build pack ecosystem. And it
Yeah,
could have a very different meaning over there. I mean, it's
yeah.
unlikely to with those particular two sets of initials, but you know, and there's no guarantee that it means the same thing somewhere else. But I think that once you start looking at CNCF build packs as the specification that enables you to build an ecosystem, and then Paketo is an instance of
Mhm.
an ecosystem,
Yeah.
then that makes sense because we can agree what these terms mean between ourselves. And like the Java subteam understands what all of the provides and requires mean. And because of that, we can have multiple build packs that offer JDKs and they can slot in and out, you know, interchangeably. Because Paketo is kind of big and handles so many different languages, there are different subteams that handle different runtimes. And we have to work together to make sure that we don't decide to step on their toes by reusing a provide required name that could be more global than we thought. Like introducing
Mm.
something that's called log would probably be a bad thing because you can almost guarantee that another runtime will go, hey, I need a log, I'm going to use it for something else, and it will be bad. But if you called it Java log, you're fine. So you can see how this qualified thing gets on. And you don't want to get into duck typing, you don't want to get into try and locking down what the build plan specification should be, because otherwise it means that you're losing the flexibility in how you create these ecosystems on top of the specification. But I think the specification is solid because I'm coming to this having worked on Apsody before that, which was an IBM modular build system that did local and production builds via
Yeah.
modular Docker concepts.
Hmm.
Where you would have like Java and stuff. Well, the idea was you had SMEs that wrote stuff. And the fun thing with Apsody was it was trying to bring concepts of governance into the image so that your architect for your product would be able to say which packages or which Maven packages were allowed to be added and removed by
Yeah.
your developers. And the developers had free reign within that scope, but they couldn't like switch Maven to point it at an external repository because Apsody would swap it straight back to the internal one when it ran the build every time. So it was the ways to guarantee reproducibility and guarantee that the build that you churned out was built out of components that you understood where they came from. Now, S-bombs are going some way to do that, but they're going a different direction. They're not saying they're the ones you approved. They're just saying that we can prove these are the ones that are in it. It's up to you then to look through that list and figure out if they're the ones you trust to be there or not, which is a bigger problem. But Apsody just went straight for the big thing and said, you tell us which ones you want, boss, and we'll delete everything else that we disagree with on the fly. Apsody was fun, but it didn't really do the trick for builds very well because the modular composability of that system became fragile as it started to get larger because you
Mm.
didn't have concepts of what was stepping on each other's toes. And although you could make this stuff work if you were, you know, balancing toothpicks on the right ends of each other, very quickly you end up at a point where you need a little bit more framework to make this work. And that's where Buildpacks steps in and says, okay, that's why there is a build pack. The build pack is only allowed to do this stuff because that way we can guarantee it won't step on the toes of another build pack. And we know then, as a person reasoning over this from a distance, that this is how it will behave as a system. And that's what attracted me to this. I also looked at Odo. We worked on Odo for a bit as well. But Odo took over what was known as the inner loop development process from Apsody, which is the one
Okay.
where yeah, where you're writing your code locally and you're spinning it through local Dockers essentially and bring it up in development mode builds where you can
Hmm.
add trace, add log, and you can do single step debug, all that stuff, whilst you're talking to your local container. I think the inner loop's really important, but Buildpacks just really doesn't care about that in that way. Buildpacks is production
Mm.
level,
Yep.
CI/CD pipeline. It's handy for developers because you can very quickly go from an empty project with no more metadata to a fully working app image. And that's something that very few other solutions in this kind of modular containerized build space have got anywhere near. So I think it's done a lot of good things. Is it top heavy? It feels it at first, I think, but once you've been working with it a while, you forget a lot of the complexity because you only care about the parts that you need to change every now and again. I think at the beginning, the problem is you don't realize just how few parts ever need to be altered. Like most people would never care about what's in the build plan for a Paketo build, ever. If they're trying to write a custom build pack to add to that build, then they'll need to care. And we don't document that well today. We don't have a build page on our Paketo docs that explains what all of the different, I don't know what we could call them, build terms, what all of the different keywords are that we use in the build plan. We don't explain
Yeah,
what they are and what they imply,
yeah, that's true.
because we should do, because that's what enables people to write build packs that could plug into our ecosystem. That's how you grow the ecosystem to get bigger. So but then again, I noticed that Paketo, like CNCF build packs, the documentation is very hard going. Like the CNCF build packs documentation, if you've written a platform, you'll know that the platform spec is about 20% of what you need to know to write a platform. There's another 20% of it hiding inside the build pack spec that you have to read as well. And nowadays, another 20% of it is in the extension spec. So that's 3 specs you have to read to implement one platform. And
Yeah.
still 20% missing, which you will learn from experience and by reading the source code of the pack CLI, because it's the only place that actually tells you what to do in edge cases.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that needs to be fixed if we want platforms to be more widespread. But then again, writing a platform is moderate effort. Most people don't bother. Most people will be using pack CLI and driving that. Like you could say in your CI/CD pipeline that you could just drive the pack CLI and be done.
Yeah.
Step 1 is download pack, step 2 is run pack, and you don't need to worry about the rest anymore, and it's great. You now support extensions and you
Yeah.
get regular fixes every time pack updates.
Yeah, yeah, sure. That's
But
definitely the preferable option. Definitely.
yeah, and when I look at like the amount of code that's gone into putting this Java platform together, I think it was worth doing because it gives us something that we can thoroughly support all the way down the line. Like as I found here with the platform problems of 0.10, 0.11, if a customer had come back and said, "Hey, I'm trying to build locally against a daemon build at 0.10 of my own custom builder. I keep hitting this problem with my multi-arch run image that it doesn't work," we can say, hold on, and we can tweak that platform to make a specific workaround. Which you can't do if you're driving pack. You'll just be like, well, we'll raise a bug upstream and we'll see how long it takes.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. So I definitely
Anyways,
understand that. And I bet it was a learning experience.
well, I mean, I've been writing it since 2021, this platform, on and off.
Oh,
The
okay.
original version of this, which was back in Quarkus 2 point something or other, just runs the creator step. It supports platform 0.7 only. Doesn't claim support for anything else, and only runs build via creator and only with daemon builds, because registry build required authentication that I couldn't add at the time. Now it supports almost everything, and the new update that's going in within the next, we're supposed to have been in there last month, but it's not there yet. It's going in whenever I get it done, is going to add a lot more capability, and Price basically brings this library up to almost the same capability set as Pack.
Okay. Interesting.
I'm
Like,
creating one of the tricks for working around permission issues, like when you mount the workspace folder, is to create an ephemeral builder. And you create the ephemeral builder because you need to create the directories in that builder image as owned by the correct build user for this current build, so that when you mount your volumes to those directories, they're mounted with the correct permissions.
mhm.
You know, the bit about Docker volumes and permissions and mounting and all the rest of it, it gets really messed up. I learned a hell of a lot on this one. If you've got a volume and it's never been mounted before, and you mount it to an existing mount point within an image where that existing mount point has UID and GID that isn't root, then it will mount that volume so that it will be owned by the user specified by the existing volume, by the existing folder creation within that container. You know what I mean? So if you've got a folder called /workspace inside your image and it's owned by UID 1000, GID 1000, and you've got a volume that's never been mounted before, and you mount it to that mount point, then /workspace will be owned by UID 1000, GID 1000. That's correct. That's what you expect, because
Yeah.
that's what you put in your base image. However, if that volume has ever been mounted to a mount point where it was mounted as root, then mounting it to workspace will have it appear with workspace now owned by root. If you mount a volume to a mount point that doesn't exist, in a container, because the basic, like say you mount your volume that's a new volume to a mount point of slash workspace doesn't exist yet, then it will mount it as root by default. If you then mount that same volume to the correct place, having made a mistake the first time round, it will now mount as root because it has been mounted as root once before. There are subtleties to this that go 3 layers deep. I forget the exact stuff, but the trick is if you want this stuff to work, make sure you're using fresh volumes and make sure they've never been mounted as root. Make sure you only mount them to mount points that do exist and that have the UID GID of the volume of the permissions that you need to have to allow the application to function. And that applies to Docker in general, not just my implementation of this. Those are Docker's rules. And Podman has a slightly different version of rules.
Of course.
Because when you're running rootless on Podman, you never ever get to run things as root. It's using CID mapping to map the root user in the container to you outside, which means that if you've got a bind mount to your file system and you're using Podman rootless, and you run a container that's root and you write files to your home directory that was mounted into the container, when you look at those files, they're owned by you, not by root. If you do the same thing on Docker, those files will be owned by root. Yeah. There are challenges with this.
Yeah.
Let me find my.
I guess there are many, many, many rabbit holes in rabbit holes in rabbit holes in rabbit holes, and you can crawl down there as long as you want.
Yeah, and I think some of them are quite fun to learn about just because of the fact that they're not going to be specific to that one project. Here you go. This is my little project that will run a script and figures out for a volume when you mount it to a container, which ownership will be applied to that mount point when the container comes up.
Oh, wow.
And you can see Docker versus Podman, rootless, and rootless in testing there. And I've run this against others as well locally to build a much bigger table. But those are the ones I've put in the public stuff.
Wow.
And it's, fresh volume to a non-existing mount point, reused volume to a non-existing mount point. So if you've had a volume that you mounted as UID GID 1000 and you mount it to / not existing mount point, does it come up as UID GID 1000? Well, it depends. If it's Docker, yes. If it's Podman, it'll come up as the first assigned user that it ever had. Because, of course, what if it was if it was mounted as 1000, and then it was mounted as 2000, and then it's mounted to a non-existing point? Does it come up as 1000, or does it come up as 2000? Well, that's where it varies a little bit.
It's like you're looking far too closely to that.
But it matters. It absolutely matters.
Of course.
This is why Pack CLI runs every single phase as root.
Okay.
Under the covers, it runs every phase as UID GID 0.
Okay.
Lifecycle drops those permissions as fast as it can when it has to, like things other than detect phase. I think detect phase will actually cause an error if you try running it as root. But otherwise, every single phase it runs. They don't have to, but they found that if they didn't have the permission to be able to rewrite the permissions on the workspace folder so that the rest of the Buildpacks could do their job. And why did the workspace folder have the wrong permissions? Because an earlier phase ran as root and therefore mounted things as root, and therefore things came up as root forever onwards. Whereas if you get it right at the beginning, you don't have to mount things as root ever again. Except for the extender phase, which does actually need root, because otherwise when Canico runs, it can't actually do things as root in the subcontainer.
It can get so ridiculously complicated. But yeah, the details matter, of course. But wow. Yeah, this is So yeah, we went to I guess a simpler route in a sense. Like if you're interested, like the CI/CD system is open source as well. This is the Go part where we basically implement the platform. Like the whole thing it does everything, right? It's a monolithic CI CLI tool that is just going to run in all kinds of CI environments. But the CNB build thing there is the command, so to say, that plays platform.
Yeah.
It can't fully. It has to rely on the fact that it already gets started in an isolated environment, so it can't actually create containers. It has to
Okay.
rely on the fact that it does start in a container. And we went for creator because it's easier and there is no problem. Like I wouldn't know what problem could be there. Extensions, of course, like creator doesn't support them, but we don't support them either. So we didn't have the problem. And when it comes to permissions, which is another big thing that is explained, right, for why
Hmm.
you should run in different phases, the pipelines actually use a kind of staging repository
Mm.
that, like, right after the build phase, it's locked down. So you could leak the credentials in theory, but they were generated right before you started the build, and they are no longer valid right after it. So we
Yeah.
said, yeah, that's not really a security concern. So let's just go for creator flow
Yeah.
from that angle, so to say.
See,
But yeah,
you're this. So it looks like, in a way, am I right in saying that you've placed a lifecycle orchestrator within a container here?
maybe it's that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
In
It's
the
like the
sense that
wrapper
instead of
around the life
running,
cycle that
yeah,
does
because
halfway what Pack does, right? It like that one supports Project Toml files, for example, um,
mhm.
which otherwise only Pack does. But yeah, it's similar, I guess.
Yeah, because it feels like, so what I'm doing is what Pack does, a literal
Mhm.
translation of what
Yeah, yeah.
Pack
No,
does
we
and what
don't.
the Spring Boot plugin does. You know, we're running containers, and the thing that we run in each container is a lifecycle phase binary with the
Yeah,
correct tags. That's why it's easy for me to run extension builds, because if I need to run another container, I just add
yeah,
that in my list. In
yeah.
fact, I think yeah, if we
And
start
we did
running
it.
that,
And we did another such lifecycle wrapper in the Cloud
yeah.
Foundry, in the Cloud Foundry
Okay,
organization. So there it's basically running on Diego, um, and
interesting.
tweaking things. It's like
Yeah,
we just got rid of the concept of builders and in a sense stacks. Like they are definitely not owned
yeah,
there. So this app CNB app lifecycle will create a droplet like CF
yeah,
expects, and then it's going to be
yeah, yeah.
Diego that runs a root file system underneath.
Yeah, I used to do a fair bit of CF stuff back when I was IBM before I became Red Hat. I was at the
Oh, you
CF
were
Summit.
IBM, became Red Hat, and now moving back.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Interesting.
mean, long story short, I was IBM between 1997 and 2014 in the UK, and then 2014 to 2020 in Canada,
Okay.
and then Red Hat from 2020 to 2025, and by the sounds of things, soon to be IBM again. So I've only really ever had one company I've worked for.
Mhm. True,
But
true, true.
it's been a fun career. Now, so I've just linked you the bit in my library where I do my orchestration. It should jump you down to the execute method with a bit of
Yeah,
luck.
it did. It did.
And you can see there that basically just comes straight in, and this is really top level stuff. It gets more complicated underneath, but you can see I'm just running the creative phase if that's what I'm doing. Otherwise, we're going to run the analyzer and detector phase, but they have to reverse order depending on what platform version you're at. For specs less than 0.7, then you have to run detector, then analyzer.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And you can see I've really tried to work to keep this code readable. So you get down to the bit where it says, if the active platform level is at least 0.10 and the factory builder image has extensions, then we're going to go off and do this stuff, right? Which I
Yeah,
think it
at
keeps
that
it
line.
clean to understand what's going on. And there you see that basically we've run it. We're going to pull out the analyzer toml. If we're going to do the extended, then we'll grab the extended run image out of there as well. We'll pull the images, get the run images, and then we do the run phase for the restorer. And then after the restorer, this is the hack to fix the 0.10, 0.11s. We go back and get the run image again and fix that up. And then finally, we go off and run the exporter at the end after all that lot. And you can see that we're at the else block that's at line 129 or so. That is the else to if we're actually doing extensions or not. So if
Yeah,
we're on platform 0.10 on 120, if we're platform 0.10 and we have extensions, then we're going to run build image extender. And then if we're platform 12 and we had an extended run image, then we'll also run the run image extender phase. that they're two separate phases, and the run image extender only has to run if the run image is being extended. Otherwise, we run the builder phase, and that's the multi-phase life cycle. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and this is my what would you call like coordinating logic that runs all of the different phases, and the rest of the project is just there to support this in a way. There's another one above that. The Buildpack build class is the one that's in charge of setting everything up in advance so this one can do its job. It's the one that will go off and create the application volume, that will download the builder image, and most importantly, create the ephemeral builder image that has all of the appropriate stuff. And because I'm creating an ephemeral builder image, I can copy in extra build packs and different life cycles into my builder image, and then have the rest of the code just deal with one standard builder image that guarantees everything's correct. Doesn't matter where it
Mm-hmm.
came from. The ephemeral builder is the cleaned up, sanitized, modified version of that, ready to run the build. And that's how it gets past Podman and Docker compatibility nicely, because that ephemeral builder nicely pre-creates all of the melt points. And because all the volumes are created fresh by this, unless they're a reused volume, in which case, if the user's already screwed the permissions on the volume, then that's their fault. I can't help them. But it lets it all work.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of fun figuring it all out.
Yeah, yeah, indeed, indeed. But I see the point of how this enables like integration into Java projects. So
Yeah,
this
yeah,
might
exactly.
work.
Because you can just drive this from a top level, and
Yeah.
next thing you know, you've got a build running. I'm driving it by. Have you seen Jitpack? Not Jitpack. JBang.
No.
Let me Google that and send you. We should wrap up this meeting soon as well, because I mean we're on the hour. So
Yeah, yeah, we are on the
but
hour.
this is JBang, which is co-developed by some colleagues of mine as well. But this one is basically a way of taking Java code and running it like it's a script file,
Okay.
because it relies on the fact that the Bash interpreter on quite a few platforms, it turns out, will treat // as a comment. And you know how you start a Bash script with a hashbang, yeah, to indicate the thing that you want it to run by?
Yeah.
Well, it turns out that if you use // and you point it at stuff, you can actually have it run Java, because you can use // to make the file that is there valid Java to begin with, and point at a Java interpreter, well, a JBang, environment thing. And so when it comes up, it looks at it and it goes, oh, well, I'm supposed to compile this Java file. And the // deps comments are told to pull which Maven files to bring in. So it downloads those, it compiles the file, and it runs it like a script. So
There are
what I've
fun
got in
things, yeah.
my test cases for my library, I've got short snippets of JBang that run different versions of it, and I just invoke those directly from build steps from GitHub Actions to have them run the various different steps that I want.
Wow, they're fun things that you can do, yeah. Until they
Yeah.
break. Like at some point in time, somebody
That's
stopped
why it's part of a
supporting
test
slash
suite.
clash.
That's yeah, but that's a different problem. So what I've got at the moment, I mean, obviously you can run it with JBang space name of your script, and then there's no argument about how
Yeah.
it's written anywhere else.
Yeah,
And I
sure.
think, in fact, in the GitHub steps, I can't even use JBang because it refused to add itself to the path correctly. So I have to invoke it kind of magically to make it run my thing, but it works, so I'm not arguing. But the point
Yeah,
being
yeah,
is that once
sure.
I
I
get
wouldn't
that
argue
into
either.
a GitHub matrix test, I can run all of the different Java versions with my library against, Spring. I can run it against Quarkus. I can run it against Podman. I can run that on all the different supported runners that GitHub Actions have. So I can make sure that this library works in every environment against every version of every library that I need it to,
Yep. See the point.
and not pay a penny for any of it, because it's all GitHub doesn't charge for that stuff for some reason.
Yeah, GitHub only charges when you reach like what is it, 2,000 build
GitHub
hours or minutes? Minutes, probably minutes.
you've got so
Hours?
many a month that you can use, and
Minutes in
I'm
a
never
month.
going to exceed that with what I've got. But they'll also charge you if you want to use like the macOS large runners or the Windows large runners, which you need to do if you're going to do nested virtualization after macOS 13. And even then, it doesn't work very well.
Yeah.
So I'm just still using macOS 13 runners, because that lets you
Yeah.
run nested virtualization. Usually, it's not guaranteed. About 1 in every 20 builds will
I mean,
fail because the
in
macOS
in, in
13 runner
Paketo
doesn't support it.
In Paketo, you can now have more, right? It's like I
Or
think
which?
Paketo was moved to be a free enterprise GitHub.
Oh yes, so the Paketo organization will have that,
Yeah.
but this library isn't part of Paketo,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that's
sure. That's
it's.
sure. You can
I mean,
make it
in
a part of
theory,
it. No, just kidding.
oh, I could make it part of one of our enterprise orgs instead. It'll get a fairly good bucket then, but
Yeah.
that's usually a good way to have various execs giving you a phone call saying, "You used how much?" I was just running a matrix test of every single possible. No, no, don't do that again. All right, then. Not my fault. We support so many different things.
Yeah, yeah. All
Yeah,
right. I think
no
I
worries.
haven't noted down any minutes. I mean, there wasn't
Ah,
any
it doesn't matter.
that
I
needed
think
minutes,
it
but
was
it
a
was a
useful
nice chat.
discussion. Yeah, useful discussion between platform people. I think there,
Exactly,
not
exactly,
really so
exactly.
much Paketo, but it was worth it. I appreciate
Yeah,
you
I
taking the
agree.
time to
I
show me
agree.
your stuff that you've got there because it's an interesting take. I'll have a think about that. I don't think I'll ever need to go that way, but it's good to know
Probably
that
not.
somebody has. You know what I mean?
True,
And I'll
true
keep you
that.
up to date on the multiple run image stuff if it does get to a resolution at CNCF level,
Yeah,
just so that we
yeah,
can
definitely
close that
interested.
out as and when it comes back round. No
All
worries.
right. So
Have a good one. Take
have a
care.
good one. Bye.
See you in the next.